A flat tire, a chance meeting, and a young boy who had no idea that this simple act of kindness would change his life forever. It was an ordinary Wednesday afternoon when Smith, a 12-year-old from the heart of the city, found himself walking home after school. His backpack bounced against his back with each step as he made his way down the familiar streets. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden hue on the bustling neighborhood. Smith wasn't in a rush. In fact, he was looking forward to meeting up with his friends at the local park. They played basketball every afternoon, and today was no different. But as he strolled, his mind wandered. He thought about the game they'd be playing later, about the high school team that always beat them at the park, and about the cool new sneakers he had seen in the store window the day before. What Smith didn't know was that today was different. Today, fate had something unusual planned for him. As he walked down the sidewalk, a shiny black car parked on the side of the road caught his attention. It wasn't the kind of car that belonged in his neighborhood. It was sleek and expensive looking, the type of car you'd expect to see in the business district or driving down a fancy street downtown. He had seen this car around a few times, and he had even noticed the man who drove it. A middle-aged figure dressed sharply in a dark suit. The man was the type of person who carried an aura of success, someone who looked like he had it all together. Smith often noticed such people, but he never paid much attention to them. They were in a different world, one that seemed so far out of reach for him. He wasn't one to approach strangers, especially not those who seemed to have money, status, or anything that set them apart from his own world. But today, for reasons Smith couldn't understand, his feet carried him closer to the parked car. As he neared the car, he saw the man leaning over the front tire, peering at it with a look of frustration. His briefcase sat on the passenger seat, and the driver's side door was slightly ajar. Smith could tell the man was having trouble. He had a flat tire. The man was muttering something under his breath, his face twisted in annoyance. He tried to lift the car jack but seemed to be struggling. Smith stopped in his tracks. There was something about the man's distress that caught his attention. Despite his usual hesitance to involve himself in others' problems, Smith felt a sudden urge to help. The man didn't look like he was getting anywhere, and Smith, being a naturally empathetic person, couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy. After all, everyone faces frustrating moments, right? And a flat tire on a busy day was no joke. It wasn't that Smith had ever been trained to change a tire, but he had seen his uncle do it a few times. His uncle worked as a mechanic, and although Smith hadn't paid too much attention to the process, he did remember the basics: the spare tire, the jack, and the lug nuts. He figured that, with a little bit of guidance, he could probably do it. Besides, what harm could it do to try? Smith stood there for a moment, unsure of how to approach the situation. He could easily walk away, continue on his way to the park, and leave the man to figure it out himself. After all, this wasn't his responsibility. But then, something in the back of his mind whispered that he could make a difference. He took a step forward, then another. Before he even realized it, he found himself walking straight up to the man. The car owner looked up, clearly surprised. The tension on his face softened a little as he took in the sight of Smith standing there, hands in his pockets. "Hey, I can help you with that," Smith said, his voice unsure but kind. The man raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical at first. "You think so?" he asked, half joking, half serious. Smith nodded, a little more confident now. "Yeah, I've seen it done before. I can give it a try." The man chuckled, shaking his head slightly. "Well, I guess it wouldn't hurt to let you try." Smith, even though he wasn't entirely sure of himself, felt a rush of determination. It wasn't every day that a kid like him got the chance to step up and do something for someone who seemed to have it all, and for some reason, helping this man just felt right. The man stepped aside, clearly willing to let Smith have a go. As Smith got to work, he could feel the weight of the moment, the unease in his hands, the uncertainty in his heart, but also the undeniable sense of purpose. As he fiddled with the tools, his focus was sharper than usual. This wasn't just any flat tire, this was something bigger. It was an opportunity, and Smith didn't know it yet. But this seemingly small act of kindness was about to set him on a path that would change his life forever. Smith hesitated for a brief moment, his mind racing with doubt. He wasn't one to approach strangers, especially not people who seemed to live in a different world than his own. This man was clearly someone who had money, a lot of it. He wore a tailored suit, drove a fancy car, and looked like the kind of person who wouldn't usually need the help of a kid from his neighborhood. Smith had always been taught to respect others, but he also understood that people like this man were often surrounded by wealth and status. They didn't rely on someone like him. And yet, something about this man's frustration tugged at Smith's heart. There was a vulnerability in the way he stood there fidgeting with the car's flat tire that made Smith pause. For a split second, Smith thought about just walking away, minding his own business, and continuing on to the park with his friends. After all, it wasn't his problem. He had his own day to think about, his own life to live. But then again, something inside him shifted. He couldn't ignore the man's distress. Everyone, no matter their background, goes through moments when they need a hand. Smith wasn't one to shy away from lending help when it was needed, even if he didn't quite know how to fix a flat tire. Without fully thinking it through, Smith took a few steps forward, then called out, "Hey, I can help you with that." The man looked up, clearly surprised to see a young boy standing there offering his assistance. His eyes, which had previously been filled with frustration, now softened with a hint of curiosity. "Really? You sure?" he asked, raising an eyebrow as though he was questioning Smith's confidence. There was a brief pause as the man seemed to assess Smith, perhaps wondering if the boy could really help, or if this was just a naive offer. Smith nodded, trying to sound confident. "Yeah, I've seen my uncle do it before. I think I can manage." Even though Smith's heart was racing, he tried his best to project an air of certainty. In reality, he wasn't entirely sure how to change a tire. He had watched his uncle do it a few times, more than once when Smith's family car broke down. His uncle, a mechanic by trade, always made it look so easy, quickly removing the flat tire and replacing it with the spare like it was second nature. But Smith had never actually done it himself. Still, there was a fire inside him, a quiet determination that he could handle this. The man seemed to consider this for a moment, perhaps taken aback by the boy's offer. But then, with a small shrug and a smile that seemed half amused and half relieved, he stepped aside, making way for Smith to take the lead. "All right, kid. Let's see what you've got." Smith rolled up his sleeves, mentally preparing himself for the task at hand. He crouched down beside the car, studying the tire with a mix of curiosity and resolve. The flat tire was definitely a problem, and it wasn't going to fix itself. Smith began by opening the trunk, where he spotted the spare tire and the car. Chuck, as he had seen his uncle use these tools countless times, but this was different. This was his first time doing it on his own, with a real person depending on him. The jack seemed heavy, and for a moment, Smith struggled to figure out how to lift the car properly. But he didn't give up. He carefully placed the jack underneath the vehicle and started cranking it up. It took a bit more effort than he anticipated, and the car didn't budge right away. He had to adjust the jack a few times, making sure it was positioned correctly. A few seconds later, the car lifted off the ground, and Smith felt a rush of pride. He was actually doing it. Next came the lug nuts. Smith grabbed the wrench and started working on the bolts, but they were tight, much tighter than he expected. He strained to loosen them, his hands slick with sweat as he twisted and turned the wrench. The process wasn't smooth. There were a few times when he felt like he wasn't getting anywhere, and he had to take a breath, reassess, and try again. The man watched him intently, silent but observant. Smith could feel the pressure mounting, but he pushed through. After a few minutes, Smith managed to remove the final lug nut. He carefully pulled the flat tire off and set it aside, replacing it with the spare. It was a bit heavier than he thought, but he managed to lift it into place. He tightened the lug nuts, ensuring each one was secure before lowering the car back onto the ground. By the time he finished, his arms were sore, and his face was flushed from the effort. But the tire was on, and it was solid. The man stood there, his expression a mixture of amazement and gratitude. Smith wiped his hands on his pants and stood up, his heart pounding from the physical exertion, but also from the sense of accomplishment. He wasn't a pro, but he had done it. The tire was fixed, and he had managed to help someone. Someone who seemed like he wouldn't need help in the first place. The man smiled, shaking his head in disbelief. "Well, kid, you actually did it. I don't know many people who would have stepped in like that." Smith couldn't help but grin. "It wasn't too bad. I've seen it done before." The man chuckled, clearly impressed. "You're more capable than most people think, huh?" Smith shrugged, trying to hide his excitement. "I guess so." As the man looked at the freshly replaced tire, his respect for Smith grew. But little did Smith know, this simple act of helping out a stranger would set off a chain of events that would completely change his life. As Smith tightened the last bolt, his muscles aching from the physical effort, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. The tire was finally secured, and the car stood steady once again on its new wheel. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he took a deep breath, wiping his hands on his pants. He couldn't believe he had actually done it. The car was back in business, and he had been the one to make it happen. The man, still standing a few feet away, had been watching him the whole time. At first, his face had been filled with skepticism, unsure if the young boy could actually pull it off. But now, as he surveyed the freshly mounted tire, there was nothing but genuine surprise in his expression. The disbelief was still there, but it was mixed with admiration. He slowly walked over to Smith, who was standing tall, breathing heavily from the effort. Mark placed a hand on Smith's shoulder, his touch firm yet warm. "I can't believe you just did that," he said, a smile tugging at his lips. "You're something special, kid. What's your name?" Smith, still feeling the rush of accomplishment, looked up at the man and smiled proudly. "Smith." "Smith," Mark repeated, testing the name on his tongue. "Well, Smith, I have to tell you, most people would have just walked right past me, but you didn't. You stepped up without hesitation and helped me out when you could have easily kept walking. That means a lot to me." Smith shrugged nonchalantly, as if it was no big deal. To him, it was just helping out someone in need. It wasn't about impressing anyone or seeking recognition. It was simply the right thing to do. He had seen people struggle before, and if there was something he could do to make their day easier, he would. He didn't see this act as extraordinary. It was just a part of who he was. But Mark wasn't done. The words that came next would be the ones that changed Smith's life forever. "Listen, Smith," Mark said, his voice now more serious. "I want to offer you something. I'm the CEO of a company that helps underprivileged kids learn tech skills, things like coding, app design, and digital marketing. We work with kids from all backgrounds, giving them the tools they need to thrive in today's world, and I'd like to invite you to check out what we do, maybe even start working with us." Smith's eyes widened, not quite processing the magnitude of what Mark was saying. "Tech? Me? But I don't know anything about tech," he stammered, his mind racing. He had always been good with his hands, but the idea of tech, coding, apps, all of it, felt like a different world. He was a regular kid from a working-class neighborhood, where tech wasn't something that was easily accessible. It was for people who could afford fancy schools or had resources and connections. How could someone like him fit in? Mark let out a chuckle, his eyes twinkling with understanding. "No one starts out knowing everything, Smith," he said, placing an encouraging hand on his shoulder. "But that's the beauty of it. You don't have to know anything to start. What you do have is something rare, an attitude that I see in only a few people. You helped me without a second thought. That kind of kindness and willingness to step up is exactly what we look for in the people we work with. I believe you've got potential. More than you know." Smith felt a mix of emotions wash over him. Confusion, excitement, disbelief. Here he was, standing in front of a CEO, someone who seemed worlds apart from his reality, and this man was offering him a chance at something he never imagined. Tech? A world of computers, coding, and gadgets? It seemed like something reserved for those who had the privilege of being born into it. But Mark wasn't just talking about the opportunities that came with money or status. He was talking about something deeper, an opportunity to grow, learn, and change his future. Mark saw something in Smith that Smith hadn't fully recognized in himself. "Why me?" Smith asked, still processing what was happening. "I mean, I'm just a kid who helped change a tire. What makes you think I can do something in tech?" Mark smiled, his eyes kind and patient. "It's not about what you've done or where you come from. It's about who you are. You didn't hesitate when you saw someone in need. That's a quality I can't teach, Smith. But the skills you need? That's where we come in. We'll teach you everything you need to know. How to code, how to design, how to innovate. All you need to do is be willing to learn, just like you were willing to help me today." Smith stood there, his mind spinning. The idea of learning tech, of building something from scratch, was a far cry from his day-to-day life. But something about Mark's words resonated with him. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that this was an opportunity to step out of his comfort zone and into a future he'd never dreamed of. "I don't know what to say," Smith muttered, still in awe. "I've never even thought about something like this before." Mark gave a reassuring smile. "You don't have to say anything right now. Just think about it. I'll leave you my card. When you're ready, give me a call. You never know where this could take you." Smith took the card from Mark's hand, still uncertain but feeling a glimmer of excitement flicker within him. It was a new world, one he had never considered. But for the first time in his life, Smith felt like something bigger was on the horizon. And this time, it wasn't just about helping someone fix a tire, it was about fixing his own future. Smith couldn't quite process everything that had just happened. One moment he was helping a man with a flat tire, and the next he was being offered an opportunity by a CEO to step into the world of tech. Mark's words echoed in his mind. "I want to offer you something." The offer seemed so unreal. A CEO offering a kid from his neighborhood a chance to learn tech? It felt like a dream he had no idea he was even allowed to have. As Smith walked away from that encounter, his mind raced. Could this really be happening? Was he really being given an opportunity to change his life? When Smith got home that evening, he couldn't stop thinking about it. The card Mark had given him sat on his desk, and he kept staring at it, as if it held the key to something enormous. He knew this wasn't just some offer. It was a chance to do something beyond what he had ever imagined for himself. His neighborhood wasn't known for tech or high-paying jobs. It was a place where people worked hard, sometimes for little reward. The idea that he, Smith, could be part of something bigger, something in tech, a field he had never even thought about, was almost impossible to believe. But the next week, Smith showed up at Mark's office, just like he was told. He could hardly believe his own feet as he walked into the building, a shiny modern structure that stood in stark contrast to his own surroundings. He had seen buildings like this on TV, in movies, or maybe in the magazines his mom flipped through while drinking coffee, but he had never been inside one. The marble floors, the sleek furniture, the clean lines of the architecture. It was all so different from the small, modest homes he was used to. When Mark greeted him at the door, Smith could see the warmth in his eyes. "Glad you could make it," Mark said with a smile. He led Smith inside, and the feeling of being out of place intensified. Smith had never been in an office environment like this before, let alone a tech company that seemed so high-end. He was ushered through hallways filled with modern artwork and high-tech gadgets, which only made him feel more out of his depth. Mark introduced him to several people who worked in the office, mostly young adults, some in their 20s, others in their 30s. They all seemed so at ease, talking about coding languages, app design, and tech startup ideas as if it were second nature to them. Smith's mind was racing as he tried to follow the conversations, but most of the terms they were using sounded foreign to him. JavaScript, Python, user interface design, it all felt like a new language. One of the people Mark introduced him to was Lucas, a young software engineer who had a calm and approachable demeanor. "This is Lucas," Mark said. "He's going to show you around and explain a bit about what we do here." Lucas shook Smith's hand and led him to a conference room where several large monitors were set up, displaying lines of code and graphs of app usage. Smith had never seen anything like it. He was used to seeing the apps on his phone, but he had no idea what went on behind the scenes to create them. "Let me show you something," Lucas said, clicking away at one of the keyboards. The screen changed, showing lines of code that seemed like a jumble of random numbers and letters to Smith. But as Lucas explained how it all worked, Smith began to understand the basics. "This," Lucas said, pointing to the screen, "is how we build an app. It's like writing a story, but instead of words, we use code to tell the computer what to do." Smith was fascinated. He had never thought of it that way before. To him, computers had always just been tools to play games or check social media. But now, they seemed like a canvas for creativity, a way to build something from nothing. He felt, like he was finally beginning to understand the potential of this world that had previously seemed so far out of reach. Mark walked in halfway through the demonstration, his eyes lighting up when he saw Smith's interest. "See, Smith," he said, "it's not as complicated as it looks. It's all about learning the rules and being curious enough to experiment, and I can already tell you've got that curiosity." For the next few hours, Smith was introduced to more members of the team. They showed him how they designed apps, discussed market trends, and even talked about the startup world, how they turned an idea into a business, how they funded their projects, and how they reached out to potential users. Smith could hardly keep up with all the new information, but something inside him sparked with excitement. He felt like he had stepped into a completely new world, one full of possibility and growth. At the end of the day, Mark sat down with Smith and asked him how he felt. "What do you think, Smith? Do you see yourself doing something like this?" Smith didn't know what to say at first. He was overwhelmed by everything he had seen and learned in just a few hours. It was a lot to process, but the more he thought about it, the more excited he became. I think I could do this," Smith finally said, his voice full of newfound confidence. "I don't know everything, but I want to learn." Mark smiled, proud of how far Smith had come in just a short time. "That's the spirit. We'll be here to help you every step of the way. There's a lot to learn, but you've got the right attitude, and that's half the battle." Smith walked out of Mark's office that day with a feeling he had never experienced before, a sense of purpose, excitement, and hope. This wasn't just a lucky break. This was the start of something that could change the course of his life, forever. And for the first time, Smith felt like he had the tools and the opportunity to build his future, one line of code at a time. Smith's life wasn't the same after that moment. It had changed in ways he could never have predicted. Gone were the days of merely dreaming about a better future. Now, he had a clear path forward. From the very first time he stepped into Mark's office, Smith found himself immersed in a world that seemed too big for him yet too enticing to ignore. He went from being a curious boy with big dreams to a driven teenager committed to learning coding, app design, and even business strategies. Every moment of his time was spent absorbing everything he could. From late nights spent reading tech articles to hours spent coding his first app, Smith had never been more determined in his life. Mark's company became more than just a learning environment for Smith. It became a place where he could grow, fail, and succeed all at once. Smith spent countless hours in the office, shadowing mentors, attending workshops, and diving into online tutorials. The work was challenging, but Smith's enthusiasm kept him going. Every line of code he wrote, every design he perfected, and every bug he fixed brought him one step closer to achieving his goals. Mark, who had become a mentor in every sense of the word, was always there, offering advice, encouragement, and the occasional push when Smith thought he couldn't do it anymore. Smith's journey wasn't easy. There were days when he doubted himself, days when he thought about quitting. He had no background in tech and was entering a world dominated by people who had years of experience. But Smith was different. He was hungry for knowledge, and every challenge he faced only fueled his desire to succeed. What had once seemed like an insurmountable task, coding a simple app, became an exciting challenge he was willing to tackle head-on. His natural curiosity and work ethic propelled him forward. Slowly but surely, Smith was developing skills that he never thought possible. 1 year later, Mark called Smith into his office. Smith entered, his heart pounding with anticipation. "I've been watching you, Smith," Mark said, a proud smile spreading across his face. "Your progress has been outstanding. You've grown so much in such a short time. It's time for you to take the next step." Mark leaned forward, looking serious but excited. "I want to offer you an internship at the company." Smith couldn't believe it. The words felt like they were floating in the air, like a dream. An internship? With a company that had given him a chance? This was the moment he had been working toward, the moment that could solidify his place in the tech world. Mark had seen something in Smith, a combination of raw talent, determination, and a willingness to learn, that had convinced him to offer this opportunity. It was a major turning point for Smith. By the time Smith graduated high school, his life had already taken an incredible turn. He was no longer just the curious kid who helped a stranger with a flat tire. He had become a young tech entrepreneur. The internship with Mark's company had opened doors for him that he never thought were possible. He had gained invaluable experience, learned how to navigate the business side of tech, and most importantly, built connections with people who shared his passion for innovation. And then came the breakthrough. Smith's first app, a simple game he had designed during his free time, was gaining traction. It wasn't a massive success, but it was enough to get people talking. He had learned so much about app development, from user interface design to coding and even marketing, and his app was starting to reflect that knowledge. Slowly but surely, the game began to climb the ranks in app stores. Smith watched in awe as the download numbers ticked upward, realizing that he had created something that people actually wanted to use. As his popularity grew, so did the opportunities. Smith started receiving invitations to speak at tech events, share his experiences, and network with other developers. He attended conferences, made invaluable connections with investors, and began to shape the future of his own tech career. He no longer saw himself as the kid from the block. He was now a part of the tech world, surrounded by like-minded individuals who were eager to innovate and push boundaries. He was one step away from building his own startup, one that could change the world the way he had once only dreamed of. From a kid who once helped a stranger with a flat tire to a young tech entrepreneur, Smith's life had completely changed. The world of technology had opened up to him, offering him a path filled with endless possibilities. And it all started with a simple act of kindness, a gesture that led to a connection, an opportunity, and a future that Smith had never imagined for himself. Smith's story is a reminder that no act of kindness, no matter how small, goes unnoticed. You never know where a single moment can lead, and sometimes, helping someone else is the first step toward transforming your own life. And for Smith, that first step started with a flat tire. Smith's journey from a curious young boy to a thriving tech entrepreneur shows us that sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness can spark life-changing opportunities. His story reminds us that no matter where you come from, or how little you may have, your dreams are always within reach if you're willing to step up and take that first chance. What started with a simple flat tire ended up transforming Smith's entire future. And the best part? You never know when your own life-changing moment could happen. If you enjoyed Smith's incredible story and want to hear more inspiring journeys, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you never miss out on stories that might just change your life too. Hook. Who knows? Maybe the next life-changing moment is waiting for you around the corner. Keep your eyes open, keep helping others, and watch as the world changes around you. Don't let a single moment pass you by.